Welcome once again to the Chapter 49 podcast. Today is Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. Glad you've joined us today. We were very glad to welcome once again Chapter President Duncan Giles. And if you're watching on video and he looks a little different on the screen, why is that, Duncan?
That's because my wonderful partner, Kim, finally figured out how to change my screen around so I can do it lengthwise instead of up and down. So
Okay.
You're getting to see probably a little bit more of me, which is probably not a good thing.
Well, at least a different format. That's always good. Well, we're glad Kim got you straightened out on that. We're glad to have you back. The first thing I would like to say in this podcast is the last time we had a podcast, our guest was Kata Saibenga, and Kata was very kind at a very busy time in her schedule to give us a little of her time and talk about the avoidance of that debt ceiling crisis right just a few hours after it was enacted by Congress and on the way to the president's desk at that time. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to say who it is, I have an internet service provider in my home that has always been extremely reliable, except that day. It just was one of those odd things where I lost my internet connection right in the middle of the discussion. So we apologize to Kat. We'd love to have her back because at the end of the podcast, we were planning on talking about more about her operation, what she does and her staff does. So we hope to have her back at a future time and talk more about that. So to her, we are sorry about that, but those things happen and there's really sort of things that are out of our control. I want to start off, Duncan, by talking about what I think would be considered one of the great strengths of any local union. And that's the fact that a local union is, in fact, a democracy. You know, local unions at NTEU, the members vote on who the officers will be, chapter president on down. So there's going to be a national election. You'll be voting in that this coming August. The convention will be in Detroit, and we'll have a new national president because Tony Reardon is retiring, our current national president. There'll be other offices also voted upon by the delegates to the convention, and they were all elected by their local chapters. So I want to just talk a little bit about our local election here, Chapter 49. You have, if you're a member of NTEU, you should have received two mailings, one mailing with the notice of the election, when it will be held and so forth, and a second mailing correcting the first one. There were some errors. Those things happen. We are all human after all. So that clarifies the offices that will be up, how you nominate someone for the office, and then, of course, when the election will be held as far as the counting of the ballots and how you submit your ballots and all that. So Christopher Ropa is the election committee chairman. So if you have any questions on any of that, you may contact him directly. And Duncan, I don't know about you, I still think that through all my time, going all the way back to 1983 when I first joined NTEU, that one of the greatest strengths of a local union is the fact that it is a democracy.
Absolutely, Larry. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I'm always in favor of, whether it's a union chapter election, a city or municipal election, state, federal, whatever it is, that people, I always encourage people to vote. You want to get out there, you want to make your voices heard, because these are the choices that can impact your day-to-day either work life or regular life, depending upon the type of election it is. So I just want, like you said, had to send out a correction notice because we need to make sure that everything's done correctly. And sometimes, democracy can be messy, but that's okay. It's fixable. It's taken care of. And just hope everybody, realizes that. And please do vote.
Right, and you'll have your chance to vote here in the near future. It's going to be a mail-in election. That's the way we do that here at Chapter 49. We have, I think, ever since we became a local chapter many, many years ago. So thanks for that update. And again, Christopher Ropa is the chairman of the nomination election committee, and any questions should be directed to him. We encourage you to vote, be a part of the democracy that is NTEU if you are a member of Chapter 49. Let's move on to something, because we are recording this on a Tuesday, which is June 13th. And coming up next week, from a recording date will be Juneteenth. June 19th is the it just so happens it all comes out. It's a Monday holiday now, I think, but it comes on the exact date of June 19th. And Juneteenth has a very special historical meaning, Duncan. So, and it's only been about, I think this is what, the second or third year this has been a federal holiday. It's been a long time coming. Explain the importance of Juneteenth if you can.
Yeah, it is the third year because I remember when we had the first year, we are in the middle of negotiations for the national contract that we have now. And as I was in the airport in Washington, D.C., preparing to fly back, they were talking about, okay, now it's passed, but it's not going to take effect until next year. And then by the time I landed, my phone was blowing up because it was taking place that week. So it was like, oh, what's going on? No, it is, it is an extremely important holiday, I feel. And for those of you who don't know the history of Juneteenth, just a quick brief on it is, everybody knows about the Emancipation Proclamation that was done in 1863 by President Lincoln. Well, that only took effect when they had the states that were basically under Union control. So while the Civil War was going on, they didn't, those slaves were not impacted by that. And, once the Civil War ended, people were like, okay, well, at that point it was done. Well, no, because Texas was still in there. They were still fighting in the West, in the Southwest. And it wasn't until a general arrived in Galveston, Texas, with about 2,000 Union troops to enforce what was called then, they released it on June the 19th, General Order Number 3, which was to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. And that was the last big bastion of slaveholder. Apparently, they moved over 100,000 African Americans into Texas from the South because these people did not want to give up their rights. So, this is something that's extremely important to, not only African Americans, but anybody like you and like me who has a sense of history and knows how important a date this was. So I'm very grateful that we are able to have this federal holiday to recognize this and to, understand the seriousness of what had happened and how far we've now come.
Yes, and the end of slavery is something worth celebrating. And I've noticed that local communities are all around the country are celebrating it. Where I live in Fishers, Indiana, there's been actually a celebration for Juneteenth before it was a federal holiday. There's been some kind of a local event, and it's become much bigger. And there will be one at Conner Prairie on the 19th in Fishers, where I live. And that's just one small microcosm of an example of what's happening throughout the country. So it's a recognition by the federal government of just how important the end of slavery is to our history. And Duncan obviously has done his homework on history. He had a very good detailed story to tell on that. So when you celebrate that day off on June 19th, Juneteenth, this coming Monday from the date that we are recording this, enjoy your holiday, your 3-day holiday. Don't you always should do that, but think about, maybe celebrate locally just what the entire holiday is about. Anything further on that, Duncan?
The only thing I can say is, I've heard a lot of people say, well, why do we need this holiday? It's just another extra day, or, it's not that big of a deal. It's a huge deal. It truly is a huge deal from a historical perspective. And I think as time goes on, more people will understand that.
I want to talk about something related to sort of our election, I think, and because we are good. We Chapter 49 run our local elections through the United States Postal Service. In order to get a ballot to you, NTU Chapter 49 has to have an updated mailing address for you. In order to have an updated mailing address for you, you must have an address with the National Union, because the National Union presents that information to the local chapter so we can send out that mailing to you and you can participate in our election. You get your nomination letter, as I mentioned before. Then, of course, the ballot will come out once the nominations are in and you vote for whomever you wish to vote for. in that election. And again, NTU at Chapter 49 has president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer up for election. So in order to vote for that, you have to have, or to even get the nomination letter, you had to have had a current address on file. NTU nationally is working on making sure not only we have, as a union, your current mailing address, but your email address as well. So you can get updates from our national union and our local union on occasion. So in order to make sure everybody has checked their latest information, NTEU nationally is not only asking people to go in and number one, check and make sure everything's okay. If it is, verify that, confirm it. If it's not, make the current change. And if you go in and do that, you're at least entered in a contest. Tell us about that, Duncan.
Yeah. Everybody thinks that, okay, well, I've updated my address with the IRS, so NTU will naturally have it. Oh, no, nay, that would be way too easy and logical. We work for the federal government. We know that doesn't happen too often. What needs to be done is whenever you change your address, you need to update it on the NTU website. Very, very easy to do. The website's very intuitive and can help you out with that. But what the national office does now every year in June is to, try and encourage people. So if you go in and either update your address or confirm your information is current, so you don't even have to have any changes or anything of that nature, NTU will be giving away 3 $85 Visa cards at random to people who've gone in and done this. And the reason for the $85 amount is this is NTU's 85th year. So they wanted to pick that amount to celebrate it and giving away, these 3 Visa cards to people who go in and make sure their addresses are current. And I can tell you from somebody who has tried to help employees correct their addresses, it is something that is very helpful. We did a sweep on this earlier this year, and I think there are still some addresses out there that may be incorrect. So if you've not received a nomination ballot or something like that, please contact Chris Ropa, and he will make sure that you get the information that you need to be able to participate. And please also update it on NTU's website so they have the accurate information as well.
We have mentioned before that it's very easy to check your information on the NTU.org website, NTEU.org. You go in, and if you're not already signed up, you can sign up, put your information in there. And if you have your password, you go in, and even if you've forgotten it, they give you a way of retrieving it or making a new one. You go in there and make sure everything is okay. And if it is, you'll get, if your mailing address is correct, you want to check your email address, get updates from our national union as well. But when you go in and do that, then you'll get a ballot and you can vote in the local election. So not only that, but you're entered in a contest, a little extra added incentive, if you will. So good reasons for you to do that. And if you're just not an internet person at home, check with Duncan, any officer of NTEU, or Christopher Ropa, or anybody on the nomination election committee, and they will take care of that for you. So you'll make sure you've got a current address for the election coming up. Well, Duncan, one thing that's happened recently is that there was a big confab in Kansas City, Missouri, and that was held at the campus there in Kansas City. And in that meeting, the Commissioner of Internal Revenue Service met with a number of chapter presidents. I know you were unable to attend for a variety of reasons, but I would like to just ask you to go over some things. There are 4 areas where there was major discussion amongst the commissioner and those chapter presidents. And the first one caught my eye for sure as somebody who's been not only a union official, but also a group manager as well in my IRS career. And the first thing that came up was manager training. Why do you think that was the case?
Yeah, this is one of those things, Larry, that has been a issue for chapter presidents for many years, depending upon the area that they're in. A lot of managers, either temporary acting managers or permanent managers, just don't seem to get proper training on the contract. And that's something that we think is very important for them, because we are constantly talking to managers, and I get managers quizzing me all the time because, sometimes they can't get the answers they need from labor relations, and they want to know specific things that are in the contract or in statute, things of that nature. So it's very important for them to be able to do that, to be able to manage. Managing is not easy. And if you don't have all the facts on how you're supposed to do things, that makes it even more difficult. And so we want to make sure, among other things, that managers are trained on the contract, that there's some manager accountability, that there's stability in management, things of that nature that makes it easier for employees. And these are things that, there was a pre-meeting that I was on with the commissioner, and, those are some of the issues that were discussed as well. And this is very, very important to all the chapters out there, that we have people that understand the contract when they're dealing with employees.
One thing that I found very interesting in that listing of issues was the fact that I think NTEU would like to have people who are I don't know, but are named to be acting managers have a little more training or background. I know that when I was a manager, I had to be away. In fact, I was managing taxpayer assistance centers. I had to be on the road. I had not only at the beginning, I had the large office in Indianapolis. I had 3 smaller offices. I had to travel each month for a while to make sure I visit each of them. And I was on a national team, and I had other things that I had to do, and I needed somebody to be acting for me. And I think there's a feeling that where there's so much time spent with acting managers that when NTEU is trying to solve a problem, maybe that acting manager just really doesn't know what to do.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not their fault a lot of times. They're just thrown into it unprepared, because it's not the manager's job to give the acting manager training. It's something that should be basically already planned out. If we have people in the FLIRT program for future leaders, or, basically if they're in a cadre to be a manager, there should be some issues that they're trained on, and the contract is definitely one of them. So the more training that we feel that we can get for managers, be it acting or permanent, I think the better it'll be for employees. And that's what it all boils down to for us. How do we make it better for the employees?
And another issue that came under that caught my attention had to do with trying to resolve disputes at the lowest level possible. And I know when I was a manager, I worked very hard to do that. So it never had to leave the group. We got everything settled internally. Not every group does that. And some managers make that more of a, how should I put it, more emphasis on that than others. I always tried to do that. And I think there are a lot of managers who do that as well. Some do that better than others. And you've been involved in a number of disputes. And have you ever thought to yourself, boy, if that manager just could have somehow worked this dispute out internally, I'd never have to be involved in this.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you always want to do it at the lowest level possible to work an issue through, be it formally or informally. In chapter 49, if we can, we try to do it informally first, because it usually works out faster, and is a great, as long as it benefits the employee and gives management as the IRS what they need, that works out a little bit better, we believe. But, no matter whether you go formally or informally, the lower level you can do it, the faster you can do it, the better. I still remember when we were standing up in the, after our reorganization, and, when there was before there was a W&I and before there was an SBSE and things of that nature, there was somebody that was central to answer to, and it could be answered at the lower level. I had an issue in a post of duty where a TAC was in that had a rope separating the area between the TAC and the rest of the office, and there would be people coming back and forth, and it got to be into big to do. I literally had to contact the commissioner of W&I and the commissioner of SBSE and say, yes, this is silly, this is absolutely nuts, but you two are the lowest level where this issue will meet.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and they were both like, this is nuts. And it's exactly, this is the way the situation is set up. But that's why I'm always, I always ask for higher level managers and executives to make sure they empower their managers to solve these types of issues at the lowest possible level. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a talk. If there's a grievance, can it be solved at the lowest level? Does it have to keep going up? Can we get this thing resolved? Um, and so that's one of the things that we've talked to the commissioner about, and I think he was very receptive to that idea.
Well, that's my next question. He seemed receptive to do something. I do remember when I was a new manager, there were two different phases of the training. I took my first phase relatively early, but it took a very long time for that second half or part of my training to come up. And I do remember us meeting, I think we were at the Memphis campus, and there are several executives who were housed there. And we met with them, and they were asking each of us how long it had been, how long we've been managers, and they were shocked that we had spent that much time in management and had not received this part of the training yet. And I think that opened their eyes. Okay, we need to do something here. Of course, their budgets were tight and we had to travel and all that kind of thing. I think that was part of that. But let's move on to employee training, because looking at that, Duncan, that relates to something you and I talked about just recently. And that's the fact that the service is having trouble incentivizing people to become OJIs, on the job instructors. And once you go to your formal training class, you get on the job. That OJI is a very big bridge between the classroom training class, virtual or otherwise, and then into your actual job, the work you do on the job. That OJI is a very critical bridge to that. And you were mentioning that, people were busy and had their own cases to work and didn't get relief from their casework. Therefore, they were really not incentivized to be an OJI. Any indication the commissioner was listening on this issue?
I think he absolutely was. We had brought this up in the smaller work groups, and then apparently in the larger session, that's what he understood us loud and clear to say, if you want people to do this extra work, this collateral duty of being an OJI or something of that nature, then you're going to need to have to reduce their inventory, or not make them take as many calls, or whatever the particular division is and the type of work that they do. Because otherwise, why would you want to do that? Okay, you want to be an OJI? Great. Well, we're not going to do anything for you. You're still going to have to do all your regular casework. Why would anybody want to put themselves through that? So we want to make sure that the people are incentivized, as you said, to be OJIs, so there can be the more experienced people helping them. And we also want to make sure that we get more in-person training, because virtual training is fine for a lot of things, but we all know that in-person training is going to be more valuable. It's much more expensive. That's absolutely true, but it is going to be more effective just because of the discussions that come up. And I think the commissioner realized that there needs to be a balance there of the two.
Yeah, I think that the many studies have shown that in-person training is much more effective as far as training people and getting it to sink in than virtual. Not that virtual can't be used in some cases, but if that's all you do, or it's mostly what you do, that you pay a price for that, I think, and that's I think the message. I want to move on to a part of the discussion that was described as culture, the culture of the service. What were the basic issues under that umbrella?
Yeah, it's we need to be more cohesive. There needs to be a less of it. There's a prevalent attitude in a lot of places that it's us against them. It's employees against management. And when you get to that type of thing, it's tough. It's very, very tough. So you want to make sure that we're all trying to be one IRS. We're all pulling to do the best we can for the taxpayers. And we want to make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction. We're all doing the same things. Um, we're all making sure that, that there is work-life balance, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we're changing this culture, that and the culture, I'll tell you, from the time that when you were around and when I was 10 years ago or so, 10, 15 years ago, the culture has changed. It hasn't changed enough but it has changed a lot. And that's a good sign, but it still has a long way to go. And we wanted to make sure that the commissioner understood that, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that employees are put in the best spot possible to do their jobs the easiest way they can. And, until you've got a culture where everybody's pulling together and pulling towards one goal and not an adversarial type situation, per se, for a lot of it, then once you get to there, you're going to be in good shape. But until you get that, and there's, a manager is going to be managing. So there's always going to be differences. That's understood, that it's expected. But how someone manages, do they do constructive criticism in private and public praise? Or are they out there shouting at somebody on the work floor? Those, or, singling somebody out in a meeting in a very negative way. We're trying to make sure that it's more of the former than the latter.
I know, Duncan, that's important, but I want to ask one question. Based on what you heard about the discussion in Kansas City, I mean, Commissioner Werfel had been with IRS before. It's not like most commissioners come in and it's a brand new culture for them. Commissioner Werfel had a taste of culture before he got here. Do you think he understands this issue?
That's a great question, and I truly believe he does. When he was, when he was confirmed, his first phone call was to Tony Reardon, our national NTU president. And, he and Tony and Doreen Greenwald, our national vice president, talk quite often, because he understands that he needs to have a big consideration of the employees in the organization, or else it's not going to work. And so, as Tony has said, we want, we've seen what he's had to say. It sounds positive, it sounds great, but we need to see what kind of actions are going to be. We need to know that he's going to be following through on a lot of these, because there are an awful lot of folks at a high level in the IRS that still do not buy into this, that still are very much want to, well, I want the employees in here every day. I want, they're going to do what we need to have done, regardless of their feelings, things of that nature. And that can't happen that way. This is not the way the world works anymore. You have to be considerate of the employees' needs, what they have to have, things of that nature. So if you're not, it's not going to work. I know he gets that. Whether those below him, who will be ultimately charged with implementing this, uniformly get it or not, is going to be probably the bigger issue.
And I think and this kind of dovetails us and bridges us into the next issue that was discussed, or this general area of employee safety, coming, and wellness as well, coming out of the COVID era, where we all had to worry about our wellness and safety. We still do. It's just a little different atmosphere to do so. And one thing that really struck me is that, the employee assistance program, you and I have talked about this many times, implemented after I had already started with the service. And I think there was a discussion of EAP is great, but we as an organization need to move on and do way more than what the EAP gives us. So what do you think the upshot is in this whole issue of wellness and just employee safety, security, and all those things?
Yeah, I think he understands that there's an issue there as well. Because nobody is more of a mental health advocate than I am, because you need to have a place to go to release, because the jobs are stressful. Helping taxpayers is an awesome, awesome job, but you get a lot of stress from doing that most times. My daughter is a mental health professional. She's, and I am so proud of the way she's able to help people. That's what they're for, to help people, to relieve some of that stress, to make them be able to get through the day better. And so we need to figure out how to do that better than even EAP has. When you come to employee safety, we've got an awful lot of people in the revenue agent and especially revenue officer position who've come on in the last couple of years. They've come on during COVID. When they came in, and up to this point, it's been strictly phone calls and letters. They haven't had to go out on site visits. They haven't had to knock on doors. And in this era anymore, when somebody knocks on your door, is it going to be answered friendly, or is it going to be answered by somebody with a gun saying, what do you want? What are you doing on my property? Get off my property. So we want to make sure that every step is taken to make sure that the employees who are going out into the field are taken care of and are as safe as possible, because we don't want anything to happen to anyone.
And the last thing that was the area that was discussed with the commissioner at this Kansas City meeting had to do with employee retention, something you and I have talked about numerous times on this podcast. Do you think any progress was made as far as what the chapter president's tried to press the commissioner on in terms of just how difficult employee retention has been? And I'm sure the commissioner has seen the numbers. They're not encouraging as far as retention is concerned.
That's it exactly. I think he had a pretty good idea before the meeting, because those numbers are just very, very stark. When you're seeing a quarter of our revenue officers and revenue agents are leaving in the first couple of years, the turnover we've had in service centers and in phone sites, it's just tremendous. And that's just money walking out the door. So he realizes that things have to change. If we don't change the way we're doing things, we're going to continue to have that low retention. So there needs to be attitudes changed. We need to do work differently. And that's part of, the new, what they're trying to do in shifting the focus of how the IRS is going to be with the money from the, that we had, even though some of it was clawed back, improving our technology, improving the way that we deal with each other and with taxpayers, and to help employees so they'll stay longer, they'll have more of a reason to want to be here, and they won't try and, run for the door the first chance they get.
Okay, Duncan, a lot to talk about there. The commissioner is still welcome to come on this podcast and talk about all those issues and others. We've invited him, so he's certainly welcome to come at any time. I assume we still don't have an answer either way on our request, correct?
No, have not heard a darn thing from his director of communications, surprisingly enough. But absolutely, we'd love to have the commissioner on the podcast to talk about a lot of these issues. And I would think he would want to do something of that nature, just because of the fact that I think he does have the right things in mind to do. Like you said, I think it's very valuable to him to have been here before, to have dealt with some of these issues. So he's not walking in here totally blind. He has an idea of what's going on and now what needs to be fixed, and just needs the time to fix it and the ideas. And I can tell you right now, he's gotten the ideas. So.
Okay, Duncan, your final comment for this podcast.
Yeah, I just, we're talking about voting. We're talking about Juneteenth, things of that nature. And that's what I think makes the United States such a great democracy. That, it can be messy. We can do things the wrong way for many years, but we try and strive to do the right things. And that's what this country, to me, be it a chapter, be it a national organization, be it a state, local, federal, whatever it is, to do things the right way for the people. And the more that we can continue doing that, hold people accountable, making sure everybody's doing the right thing, I think the better off that we'll be for it.
And mine is very simple. Enjoy your summer. You and I have both had trouble scheduling this podcast because we're busy doing things that people do in the summer, which is get outside, enjoy yourself. By the way, your Dodgers won a game in Cincinnati, that a 3-game series. That was the only game they won, and you had a chance to go as a Dodger fan. Of course, I'm a Reds fan. We haven't had a lot to crow about in recent years, but you got a chance to get out and enjoy, get outside and have a good time. And I've been spending some time with my daughters and their families, so it's been very good. The time of year, just enjoy the time of year. Every summer is made for that. School's out in most places in the country, so it's time when families get together. Thank you, Duncan Giles. We'll be back again. We probably in a week or two. This is a 2-week podcast we're doing right now. Hopefully, we'll be back next week if all goes well, and and our schedules once again coincide. We have lots of holidays coming up. We have Juneteenth, and we have the 4th of July coming up not long after that. So it's good to have these summertime long weekends. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer with Chapter 49, working in communications, and a retiree. We thank you for watching and listening. Please be safe and be kind.